The kingdom of Avarice was known far and wide for its emerald valleys, towering marble palaces, and the kindness of its rulers. At its heart stood King Eldric, a man both loved and feared, and Queen Selene, whose beauty was often compared to the glow of the full moon. But above all, the kingdom cherished their daughter, Princess Elina. Born beneath a rare celestial alignment, many whispered she carried within her the fate of avarice itself. Gentle, clever, and unafraid of wandering beyond the gilded halls, Elina was adored by the people. Yet such light inevitably casts long shadows, and darker forces watched her every step. The story began on the eve of her 17th birthday. The palace had been alive with celebration, lanterns swayed in the night air, music spilled from every chamber, and nobles from distant lands flocked to Avarice with gifts. Elina, though, felt restless. Surrounded by polished jewels and endless flattery, she longed for the simpler company of the kingdom's gardens and the laughter of its common folk. Under the silver light of the moon, she slipped away from the grand feast, seeking a moment of quiet among the rose gardens beyond the palace walls, but silence was not what greeted her. As she stepped through the winding paths, she heard whispers, low voices carrying words she could not fully understand. Following the sound, she came upon the shadowy outlines of two cloaked figures near the old fountain. Their movements were quick and secretive, their language unfamiliar. Before she could call for the guards, one of them glanced up. Their eyes, gleaming unnaturally pale in the dark, locked with hers. In that single instant, Elina felt an icy chill run through her body, as if something ancient had marked her. She turned to flee, but the world seemed to collapse in on itself. A strange smoke swirled around her feet, thick as fog, pressing in from all sides. The faint fragrance of iron and ash filled her lungs, and her vision blurred. She tried to cry out, but the sound was swallowed by the air. The last thing she saw was the pale figure raising a hand, a faint green glow pulsing in their palm like a dying ember. Then, darkness claimed her. By dawn, the palace was in chaos. Guards scoured every hall and courtyard. Servants whispered of vanished footsteps, of roses crushed where none should have walked. The king, usually so composed, stood pale with fury and fear, while Queen Selene wept silently in her chambers. Princess Elina was gone, vanished without a trace. And with her disappearance, a cold shadow seemed to spread across the kingdom of Avarice, as though the land itself knew something terrible had begun. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Whenever Thomas went into town, conversations hushed as he passed, eyes narrowing with suspicion. He felt the shift in the air. The neighbors no longer saw him as just a recluse with a quiet cabin. Now he was the man harboring the dangerous dog. Bruno, oblivious to gossip, carried on with his quiet loyalty, but Thomas noticed how his companion's presence drew stares, mutters, and distance wherever they went. It was as though the bond they had forged in trust and warmth now stood beneath a cloud of doubt. One evening, as twilight bled into night, Thomas stepped outside to check the fence line. The field stretched dark and still, but Bruno's body went rigid, ears pricked, nose high. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Thomas followed the dog's gaze toward the ridge, and there, just for a heartbeat, he saw movement. A shadow slipped between the trees, larger than a fox, heavier than a stray. His pulse quickened. Perhaps Harold had been right about livestock disappearing, but not about who was to blame. Later that night, as the moon climbed high, Thomas was woken by the sound of voices outside. He reached for his rifle and crept to the window. Lantern light flickered in the yard, 3 figures moved near the gate. Bruno was already at the door, barking furiously now, hackles bristling like iron spikes. The men's shadows loomed against the fence as one voice carried through the night, "Time to end this, Thomas. That dog's a menace, and you know it." Thomas threw open the door, rifle in hand, his voice ringing louder than it had in years. "You'll not lay a hand on him." Bruno stood pressed to his side, teeth bared, every muscle ready to spring. The men flinched at the sudden appearance, but Harold stepped forward, jaw clenched. "If you won't do it, then we will. Before he takes more than sheep." The standoff stretched long and dangerous, the fire in their lanterns flickering against the night, the tension so sharp it felt like the world held its breath. Before anything could break, a sound cut through the standoff, a chilling, guttural cry from the ridge. Not canine, not anything human, but wild and hungry. Bruno snapped his head toward the sound, barking fiercely. The neighbors froze, their eyes darting toward the dark hills. Something moved out there, large, prowling, waiting. And in that instant, Thomas knew, the true threat had finally come into view.
The palace was alive with whispers as preparations for Princess Amara's arranged marriage intensified. The corridors buzzed with noble visitors, foreign dignitaries, and servants running to and fro, each caught up in their own ambitions. Amid the glittering chaos, Amara felt a growing sense of suffocation. Every smile she offered to visiting nobles was forced, every conversation rehearsed. Yet her heart yearned for the simple freedom of the palace gardens and the quiet companionship of Elina. The contrast between her gilded cage and the open fields where Elina roamed became impossible to ignore. Unbeknownst to Amara, Lady Rowena had grown suspicious of the girl's friendship. Driven by loyalty to the crown, or perhaps jealousy of Amara's independence, she began to follow the princess secretly. One afternoon, she witnessed Amara meeting Elina near the fountain, exchanging hurried whispers and furtive glances. Lady Rowena's eyes narrowed. "This cannot continue," she murmured, already crafting a plan in her mind to sever the bond between the two princesses before it caused scandal. Shadows of intrigue had begun to creep into the garden, threatening the fragile sanctuary where the girls met. Meanwhile, Elina sensed unease in Amara's visits. The joy and laughter that had once filled the garden was now replaced with tension and half-smiles. "Amara, what's wrong?" she asked one afternoon, brushing rain from her damp hair. Amara hesitated, torn between honesty and fear. Finally, she whispered, "My father. He's arranging my marriage. Soon, I won't be able to see you." Elina's eyes widened, the words striking her like a cold gust of wind. "We'll find a way," she said with determination, gripping Amara's hands. "No decree, no king, no palace can break what we have." But deep down, even Elina sensed that courage alone might not be enough. That night, as the palace slept under a moonlit sky, Lady Rowena set her plan in motion. She spread rumors among the servants that Elina was a thief, attempting to gain the princess's secrets for her own gain. By morning, gossip had reached the ears of the king, who was known for his swift and decisive temper. The next time Amara saw Elina in the garden, the tension was unbearable. Elina. I heard something, Amara stammered. They say that you might. Elina cut her off, her voice firm. Amara, do you trust me? The question hung in the misty morning air, a test that went far beyond mere friendship. It was a trial of faith, loyalty, and courage. The girls realized that their friendship was no longer just a private secret. It had become a dangerous risk. They had to act carefully, navigating a maze of palace intrigue, jealous courtiers, and societal expectations. As the sun rose, piercing the gray clouds, the fountain glistened with droplets of rain, reflecting a new determination in their eyes. They understood that the path ahead was fraught with betrayal, but also that only by standing together could they hope to survive the schemes of those who sought to separate them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the strength of their bond, the depth of their courage, and the very definition of loyalty. The palace corridors, usually filled with opulence and laughter, now seemed like a labyrinth of shadows and suspicion. Courtiers whispered behind fans, servants exchanged furtive glances, and the air was thick with tension. Princess Amara felt trapped in a gilded cage, her every movement scrutinized. Lady Rowena's rumors had reached the king's ears, and his once indulgent gaze now carried the weight of suspicion. Amara's heart ached not only for the loss of freedom, but for the growing rift between her and Elina, who remained steadfast yet increasingly cautious in their secret meetings. Elina, determined to protect their friendship, devised a plan to confront the source of the tension. One evening, as the palace lay cloaked in darkness, she slipped past the guards and approached the fountain. Amara was already there, her figure outlined against the moonlight, eyes wide with worry. "We can't keep hiding," Elina whispered. "We need to show them that our friendship is genuine, that it means no harm." Amara hesitated, the weight of duty pressing down on her shoulders. But Elina's courage, born of struggle and resilience, sparked a flicker of defiance within her. Together, they resolved to face the palace's suspicions, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Lady Rowena had escalated her schemes. She planted false evidence, suggesting that Elina intended to steal royal treasures under the guise of friendship. The king, though torn by love for his daughter, was swayed by the apparent proof and called for Elina to be brought to the palace. Word of the summons reached Elina just as she and Amara were planning their secret meeting. Panic surged through her veins, but she refused to flee. "If I run," she told Amara, "they win. We must face this together." Amara, torn between fear and loyalty, nodded. They were about to challenge the very foundations of the kingdom's expectations, risking everything for trust and truth. The confrontation in the grand hall was tense and dramatic. Elina, standing barefoot and trembling slightly, faced the king and Lady Rowena. Amara stepped beside her, radiant in her royal attire yet resolute in support of her friend. Lady Rowena's accusations were sharp and venomous, but the sincerity in Elina's eyes and the unwavering loyalty in Amara's gaze cast doubt on the false narrative. Courtiers gasped, whispers echoed, and for the first time, the palace seemed to hold its breath. Elina spoke calmly, recounting her encounters with Amara, emphasizing the honesty, laughter, and shared dreams that had bound them together. Slowly, the tension shifted, truth began to pierce through deceit. By nightfall, a fragile resolution emerged. The king, convinced of Elina's integrity and moved by Amara's courage, rescinded the harsh decree against their friendship. Lady Rowena, exposed and humiliated, retreated into the shadows, nursing her bitterness. Though the immediate threat had passed, the experience left the girls changed. They understood that the world beyond their friendship was full of danger, jealousy, and power plays, but they also realized the strength of trust, courage, and loyalty. As they sat by the fountain once more, the moonlight reflecting in the water, they felt a renewed determination. No matter the obstacles, they would face the world together, ready for whatever trials awaited. The kingdom of Eldoria awoke to a new dawn, soft sunlight spilling over the palace towers and gardens. The air carried a quiet sense of change, as if the events of the past weeks had shifted something fundamental. Princess Amara, once weighed down by duty and expectation, now walked with a newfound confidence. The lessons learned in secrecy and struggle had strengthened her spirit, showing her that wealth and privilege were only as meaningful as the compassion and courage behind them. At her side, Elina's presence was a reminder that true nobility came from character, not titles or riches. Amara's arranged marriage was reconsidered, not cancelled entirely, but delayed to allow her a choice. Her father, seeing his daughter's growth and the depth of her bond with Elina, began to understand that happiness could not be dictated by tradition alone. He recognized that the princesses had confronted danger, deception, and societal expectation together, proving that friendship and integrity could stand against the cunning of even the most calculated palace schemes. For the first time, the king allowed Amara to speak openly about her desires, her heart no longer bound entirely by royal decree. Elina, who had once navigated a life of scarcity and struggle, now found herself welcomed in the palace not as an outsider, but as a trusted companion. She taught Amara to see the world beyond the palace walls, to embrace courage, and to find joy even in simplicity. In return, Amara shared her resources, knowledge, and protection, ensuring that Elina's family could live with comfort and security. Together, the princesses began projects to improve life for the less fortunate across the kingdom, blending wealth and empathy, showing that two worlds, once divided, could create something stronger and more beautiful when united. As months passed, Amara and Elina became legends of Eldoria, not for royal decrees or palace riches, but for the unwavering strength of their bond. They learned that friendship could withstand suspicion, jealousy, and social barriers. Their story inspired other young girls across the kingdom to pursue courage and integrity over status and expectation. The palace garden, once a secret meeting place, became a symbol of freedom and hope, a reminder that, even in the most rigid structures, trust and loyalty could carve out a sanctuary. One quiet evening, the two princesses sat by the fountain, now polished and vibrant under the moonlight. "We made it," Amara whispered, her hand brushing Elina's. Together. Elina smiled, her eyes reflecting the rippling water. "Always," she said simply. They understood, in that serene moment, that the trials they had faced were not just obstacles, but lessons, proof that friendship, courage, and heart were more powerful than gold, privilege, or fear. As the stars shimmered above, the kingdom of Eldoria glowed not just in opulence, but in the brilliance of trust, resilience, and enduring friendship.